Thanks indeed for joining us on the program. Wherever you're watching from around the world, we are live from our global headquarters here in Lagos, Nigeria. I am Kelly Egiga. Let's get things started in Lebanon, where we understand at least 275 people have been killed and more than 1,000 others are wounded in Israeli strikes earlier today. It is considered the deadliest day in the conflict between militia group Hezbollah and the Israeli Defense Forces. The Israeli bombardments are set to be continuing in southern Lebanon, including around the coastal city of Tyre. Ahead of the bombardments, people had been asked to flee as far away as they can, with Israel saying it is broadening its strikes against Hezbollah. The Lebanese Prime Minister says Israel's actions amounts to a war of extermination, while Israel's Defense Minister says strikes will continue until, quote, we achieve our goals to return the residents of the north safely to their homes. As part and as expected, there has been a lot of chaos with transportation as people pack up their belongings and are making attempts to flee Lebanon in anticipation of more intensified Israeli strikes. There were reports of Israeli attacks across Lebanon today, following some of the heaviest cross-border exchanges of fire. Since the hostilities fled, Israel is also warning people to evacuate areas where it says the armed group was storing weapons. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country faces complicated days as the armed forces shifts focus to the northern frontier, from where Hezbollah has been firing rockets into Israel in support of Hamas in Gaza. Now, during a meeting with army officers in Tel Aviv earlier today, the Prime Minister appealed for unity as Israel continues to strike in southern Lebanon, saying the operations are aimed at changing the security balance, the balance of power in the north. He told the officers, quote, we do not wait for a threat, we anticipate it anywhere in any arena at any time. We eliminate senior officials, we eliminate terrorists, we eliminate missiles, and there is more to come. The statement also adds that whoever tries to hurt us, we hurt them even more. I promised that we would change the security balance, the balance of power in the north. That is exactly what we are doing. We are destroying thousands of missiles and rockets, directed at Israeli cities and Israeli residents, end quote. Well, let's get in some analysis and get some perspective now on the program. Linda Grandstein joins us now from Tel Aviv in Israel. Linda, great to see you again. As always, so much to unpack as regards this wave of attacks. But let me begin with the fact that Israel has intensified fighting and activities with Hezbollah. We are seeing tensions and panic across the region. I wonder, as this wave of airstrikes intensify, are we back to 2006?
I think we're a step before 2006. First of all, there's no Israeli ground invasion yet. There are no ground troops going into Lebanon. In addition, Israel has not yet hit Lebanese infrastructure, power plants and things like that. And Hezbollah, for the most part, has not hit civilian targets. It says it's looking at military targets. So I think there's definitely an increase in tension, but we're not yet at a full-scale war.
All right. And so Israel has also stepped up airstrikes in the last 24 hours or even 48 hours. So why is Israel doing this now? And how concerned are you about a wider regional escalation?
Well, Israel says that it is trying to get rid of the Hezbollah rocket launchers and weapons that were about to be fired at Israel. It says that a lot of these, Hezbollah has tens of thousands of missiles, including long-range missiles that can hit all of Israel. In fact, today, for the first time, Hezbollah fired some of those long-range missiles. They did not they did not kill anybody. Israeli airstrikes, as you mentioned earlier, have killed quite a few people today. But Israel says that Hezbollah has been using the population of South Lebanon as human shields and has been hiding rocket launchers and weapons both in and underneath people's homes. And so Israel sent text messages yesterday and today telling people to flee. Apparently now, according to Lebanese media, Hezbollah has also told some people to flee, and that's creating those traffic jams that you showed. They're mostly fleeing towards Beirut and towards other areas. But Israel is also striking Beirut. There are reports of another strike in Beirut just a little while ago, apparently targeting another senior Hezbollah commander. So I think that once Israel started with these pagers that exploded last week, although of course Israel hasn't taken responsibility, it says that Hezbollah is in disarray and that Israel has an opportunity to hit Hezbollah hard enough that would force Hezbollah to go north of the Litani River, which is what's called for in a UN resolution, and that would enable the more than 60,000 Israelis who were forced to evacuate from their homes at the beginning of the war. That would enable them to go back. There was one senior Israeli official today said that if Hezbollah stops firing, we would also stop firing. So there seemed to be some kind of behind-the-scenes, contacts for some kind of a ceasefire.
And Linda, people in Lebanon, you have just mentioned, are receiving calls and text messages to immediately evacuate or move away from Hezbollah sites. And you have confirmed that some are leaving for Beirut. I wonder, what other options do they have? Where else can they possibly go?
Well, they can go to other places in Lebanon, further north. Israel's strikes have been concentrated in South Lebanon, as we said. There have been a couple of strikes in Beirut, although they seem to be very focused on Hezbollah, officials. There were about 15 senior Hezbollah officials killed in a strike in Beirut on Friday, including, some of the senior leadership. But they could go to Beirut. They could go north of Beirut. And that's probably about it. And that's what's causing a lot of chaos, and a lot of people are very nervous, Lebanese, about what's the future going to hold for them. And if this does expand to a full-scale war, then basically anywhere in Lebanon could be a target.
Linda, let me put you on the spot for a moment, because in international law, I'm wondering if the actions of Israel can be justified. I imagine that Israel perhaps could reference the fact that we did send text messages and calls to civilians to leave or evacuate these areas before striking. So could that in any way be justified?
Well, Israel says that, they're striking civilian areas because Hezbollah has hidden rockets and weapons in civilian areas. In other words, if Hezbollah had focused its military power and strength in, military areas, then Israel would not hit civilian areas. So I think that's going to be their defense, and they will also say that they are trying very hard not to hit civilians. And as you said, by sending text messages telling people to leave, it is giving them a chance to escape before Israel strikes the area.
All right, and Israel is also fighting on multiple fronts, but has it met its war objective, or the Israeli military just targeting to weaken these countries in the region?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that we remember that, the war started when Hamas launched an attack on Israel, when 3,000 Hamas fighters crossed the border into Israel and killed 1,200 civilians and took 250 people hostage, 100 of whom are still being held hostage in Gaza. So, it didn't start with an Israeli aggression. It started with a Hamas aggression, and then Hezbollah started firing the next day in solidarity with Hamas. Now, Israel's goals were to get rid of Hamas in Gaza as a fighting force. Hamas is certainly weakened. Israel says it's killed about 17,000 Hamas fighters. At the same time, it has not been able to kill Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas. It has, and Hamas is still functioning, at least in parts of Gaza. A total of 41,000 Palestinians have been killed, according to the health ministry. So even if you accept the Israeli claim that 17,000 Hamas fighters were killed, you're still talking about tens of thousands of civilians being killed in Gaza, and international condemnation of Israel. And Hamas is still in charge, partly because Israel has refused to come to any sort of negotiation about what's called the day after, what happens after the war ends. And it seems that at least in the past couple of months, both Israel and Hamas have been refusing a ceasefire, and large parts of Gaza have been destroyed. In the north, in Lebanon, the war aim is to allow the people who had to leave their homes to come back to their homes and to not live under the threat of Hezbollah rocket fire. That has not yet been achieved either. So it seems that Israel has not yet achieved its wartime goals, despite the fact that we're coming up on the one-year anniversary of the war on October 7th.
Linda, let's perhaps do a journey down memory lane. Lebanon's border with Israel was the calmest frontier between Israel and any other adjacent Arab League states some many years ago, perhaps in the 1940s or thereabout. I'm just wondering, what exactly changed over the years?
Well, I think what changed is Hezbollah. I mean, Israel has no territorial ambitions in Lebanon. It doesn't want to retake Lebanon, although for several decades, Israel did occupy South Lebanon, had a security zone in South Lebanon. But I think what's changed is that once Hezbollah entered the war on behalf of Hamas, I mean, Hezbollah could have chosen not to enter the war, and then, there would not be Israeli airstrikes. Israel would not have started a war with Hezbollah. It's Hezbollah that started the war, this time in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, and presumably at the directive of Iran. I mean, while Hamas is supported by Iran, it's not a proxy of Iran. It makes its own decisions. Hezbollah is basically a proxy of Iran, as are the Houthis in Yemen and other groups. And so it seems that Iran is trying to make the Middle East go up in flames and trying to, have its long-term goal of getting rid of the state of Israel. Now, Israel has a very strong military, and that's not going to happen. But I think many in Israel were, first of all, surprised by the huge intelligence failure of October 7th, that Hamas was able to take over and actually take over several dozen communities in southern Israel. And it took the army a long time to, turn the tack and to go on the offensive. And that, all of these refugees, as they're called in Israel, aren't able to return to their homes. So I think that when the war started with Hamas, which is seen as a guerrilla organization nowhere near as strong as Israel, Hezbollah is actually seen as much stronger than Hamas, much better equipped, much better trained. Most of the Hezbollah fighters have a lot of experience fighting in Syria. And in 2006, as you mentioned, Israel fought a war with Hezbollah, and after 34 days, it basically ended up in a draw, and then that's when there was this UN resolution 1701 to move Hezbollah north of the Litani River. So Israel does find itself, fighting on several fronts. The war is taking a huge toll on Israel, both in terms of loss of life and in terms of economically, and it's taking, of course, an even larger toll on Gaza, large swaths of which have been destroyed.
And Linda, I'm just wondering, for how long can Israel cope with these wars? There's a war in Gaza and now Lebanon. I'm guessing that some other Arab nations around Israel as well could perhaps be gearing up. So just how long can Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hold on with this vision of war with his neighbors? We understand protests have been ongoing at the residence of the Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, for quite some time now. And perhaps you could also bring us up to speed as to what exactly is playing out with with the Prime Minister?
Well, so the protests are more in favor of Israel accepting a ceasefire deal, which has been on the table for a long time, that would release the remaining hostages. There are 101 hostages being held, and officially Israel says that 43 of them are no longer alive. The number's probably higher. And so the protests are more saying that Israel should accept a ceasefire. In terms of the actual military fighting, Israel has drawn down a lot of its forces in Gaza and has turned them towards Lebanon. And at least so far, there is not a full-scale war. There are not ground forces in Lebanon. Is the Israeli military and Netanyahu say they can fight as long as necessary. Israel certainly has a very powerful military, but its military, it's based on reservists. I mean, Israel's a tiny country. The entire population is less than 10 million. At the beginning of the war with Gaza, they called up something like 350,000 reserve soldiers, and some of them are now on their third round of army service, and it means that they have to leave their jobs, their families, students have to leave their studies. So, Israel can fight for a long time, but certainly not forever. I think that Netanyahu still has a strong coalition. The way Israeli politics works, it's all about numbers. If you have a majority coalition, and he currently has 64 seats in the 120-seat Knesset in the parliament, and it doesn't look like anybody, despite all kinds of threats for all kinds of reasons, has any intention of bringing down his government.
And we'll see how long he can hold on, because we also understand there have been some pressure from the international community as well for Israel to perhaps put an end to the wars in the region. And the relationship between Israel and Lebanon since the 1940s has experienced some ups and downs. But conditions, I'm wondering, for the women and children right there in the cross-border fire, I'm just wondering just how dire conditions could get in the coming days. But thank you most kindly, as always, VOA correspondent Linda Grandstein, live for us in Jerusalem, as always. Great to see you again, Linda.
Thank you.